Lepo pozdravljeni, dober dan, good afternoon everybody, and welcome to the roundtable dedicated to rhetoric. We've been having two very interesting lectures as a part of colloquium, talking a lot about rhetorical education, and this afternoon talk is somewhat dedicated to the more personal, not entirely scholarly, empirically based, theoretically founded reflections on the topic. We want to talk about today, about the rhetoric in the 21st century today, which, as we've heard many times now, might originate in classical times, but at the same time it stays firmly in the present moment, providing tools, all sorts of tools and perspectives to address socially relevant issues. Rhetoric, an ancient art of public persuasion, an essential participatory social practice, as I mentioned on Monday, has also the longest educational tradition. And the three guests that I invited to Slovenia and to share their experience and ideas and research come from two different educational traditions, three different educational traditions, three different perspectives on theoretical positions and pedagogical implementation. So what I propose today for us to discuss, because contemporary rhetorical education is more than ever connected with aspects of active citizenship and all the things that policy emphasizes as important skills for the 21st century. So my initial starting points for these talks would be, what is the relationship between rhetoric and citizenship education? Sorry, I'm being rude. How are these two topics represented in the connection? How is this connection represented in your national context at the level of education? How are teachers supported for implementing these two topics in the curricula? And of course, many things that you want to share yourselves with us. So most of you know my guests, but not all. So allow me again to introduce them. Professor Lisa Storm Villadsen, a professor of rhetoric and head of the section of rhetoric at the Department of Communication at the University of Copenhagen in Denmark, with her research interests spanning around contemporary political rhetoric, populism, rhetorical citizenship, and at the moment, official apologies. I like this topic, so I tend to emphasize it. My second guest is Professor Arlene Holmes-Henderson, a professor of classics education and public policy at the Durham University in the UK, a holder of British Academy Innovation Fellowship, and currently, in her research, she is investigating the relationship between oracy, rhetoric, and critical skills. Last but not least, my third guest is Associate Professor Anne-Grete Kaldahl from Oslo Metropolitan University at the University of Bergen and the University of Bergen, two different institutions in Norway. And her primary interests lie in educational psychology, didactics, assessment, especially focusing on oracy and rhetoric in the context of teacher education. I have to present myself as well, it's the right thing to do. My name is Janja Žmavc, an assistant professor in linguistics and a researcher of rhetoric and the role of language in education. So, I've said all of our names, and it's time for you to share your views with us. So I would like to give to the floor this first question. How do you see the role of rhetorical education today, be it in your context or as a researcher who is interested in the field? And let's start with Lisa.
Can you repeat the first part of the question?
Yeah. How you see the role of rhetorical education today?
Yeah. As important. First of all, I think in this multimedia, very international era that we're in, competencies in expressing oneself and in listening and relating critically to what others say and write and spew is almost more important than ever, especially as we see populism emerging in more and more places. Democratic institutions are under significant pressure at several places in the Western world, and I think I see rhetoric as a tool to counter some of that. Mm-hmm. So it really, I think it's up there among the really important subjects.
Thank you. Maybe Anne-Grete?
Yeah, I totally agree with what Lisa said. I think it's really important that everybody learns how to speak up for themselves and for others. And I think it's important to get to know yourself through identity formation or bildung in the educational setting, which is the optimal goal for education, especially in Norway. And behind that, it's the role of being a citizen and being able to express yourself as in the ancient Greece. So I think rhetoric bridges oracy and citizenship education, as the three of us have written about. So yeah, very important.
Very important, okay.
I think I endorse everything that Lisa and Anne-Grete have already said, but for me, there are two additional facets to the importance of rhetorical education today, and that is the impact that teaching rhetoric in schools can have on young people's social mobility and on their employability. So the fellowship that Janja alluded to, my funding from the British Academy, sees me working with several government departments in England and with several consortia of employers to understand how can we improve the life chances of young people through rhetoric. And the initial results are very promising indeed.
We've talked about a lot about that in order for students, pupils to get proper rhetorical education, teachers have to receive a proper rhetorical education at first. So you specialize in this, Anne-Grete. How is the role of rhetoric in teachers' education supported in your country?
Actually, it's really poorly supported. What would be very nice is that rhetoric will be stronger as a spiral principle through the teacher-students education. Right now it's only a part of L1, which is Norwegian, so rhetoric is actually offered to L1 students, and not everybody has L1 as their language, so it needs to be it's meant in the curriculum as a cross-curricular skill. So actually all subjects are supposed to teach rhetoric or oracy education, and also supposed to assess oracy. However, teacher education do not teach this adequately, I think. So we need to work on it.
Yeah. In Slovenian context, our students who are becoming teachers They have subjects like communication, pedagogical communication. But I think we can all agree that this is not the same as a general course in rhetoric. What's your opinion on this, Lisa?
Well, I come from a department of communication, which is the emptiest signifier I've ever heard. You know, for rhetoric, it's not terribly problematic, but I have colleagues who are philosophers and they don't think of themselves as studying communication. So I don't know what they learn in the communications course that you refer to. But I think what rhetoric can do is give students actually a pretty limited vocabulary that will get them really far. It will help them analyze situations and then think about what would be the appropriate and expedient way of communicating under the circumstances. So I think that emphasis on the contextual factors is something that rhetoric at least puts very highly. I can't say if that's not the case in other things, but I think the agent, the rhetor, the speaking person, plays a more multifaceted role from a rhetorical perspective than in some other communication perspectives, because you take the specifics of the situation and the involved actors very seriously. So you can't just have a formula of 4 steps to doing so and so. There isn't a one-size-fits-all model for how to write a good essay. And I think that's what rhetoric can do compared to at least popularized versions of communication.
Yeah. I think that's also true in the context of teaching process, because it's a chaotic situation. You have this specific group of students, the content that you have to somehow deal with. And it's really a rhetorical situation, because you always have some issue, a goal that you want to achieve. So this is why, in my opinion, rhetorical courses are important for the teacher education, because it gives them the perspective of the moment that they should be present in the moment, not in terms of, okay, I have this content, I have these pupils, their specifics, and every year is basically the same. It's not really. So this is why I ask you that. Does Denmark or your university have any rhetorical courses that are offered to the future teachers?
No, because the university doesn't train future teachers. That's in a different institution. And rhetoric has been an obligatory subject there. Then it's been folded into the Danish course, so more of a presentation technique. And now it's actually being highlighted again in the new cross-curricular life skills type of course for people who want to become teachers. So I would say it looks as if it's going to play a bigger role and a more diverse role in the training of teachers.
Thank you. Arlene, can you give us the UK perspective on teacher education, rhetorical courses, bridging to citizenship education?
Sure. So I guess I could phrase my answer in 3 parts: past, present, and future. So in the past, the teachers who have received high-quality training in how to teach rhetoric were teachers of Latin and ancient Greek. They had studied rhetoric via Greek texts like Aristotle and Demosthenes, via Latin texts like Cicero and Quintilian, so they would go into a classroom and feel really confident teaching rhetoric. The present situation, I would say, is a bit more positive. We now have teachers of English who are teaching rhetoric in their classrooms because their teacher training course has involved an element. When I say an element, I mean maybe an afternoon, 2 hours of Here's a short course in rhetoric. Go forth and teach rhetoric as part of English teaching. Drama teachers might have had the same short introduction to rhetoric. Citizenship teachers may have had a short introduction to rhetoric, as might media studies teachers have had a similar introduction. So that's the present situation. Obviously the classics teachers still do a lot of rhetoric. What about in the future? Well, we have a shifting policy landscape in the UK at present, where I think there's good news on the horizon about the growing importance of rhetoric and oracy in classrooms. So I'd like to predict that within the next 1 to 3 years, there will be a compulsory component of qualified teacher status, which involves rhetoric. So every teacher who needs the qualification in order to teach in England will have to have completed some sort of course in rhetoric as part of that course, regardless of whether they're teaching primary or any secondary subject. This is the dream, guys, this is the dream. And I guess it would also be great if that could be continued into our policy framework called the Early Career Framework. So teachers in England, the training doesn't stop when they get qualified teacher status. For the next few years, they have to then meet a certain number of standards to show that in that early career phase, they are research informed and practice led. And it would be great to see rhetoric as part of that early career framework too. Are we there yet? No. Are we having conversations about it? I would say we're on the verge.
Just to add the Slovenian perspective, sadly we don't have with us today Igor Ž, who is supposed to take part in this discussion. And if he were, hi there, I hope you're getting better. He would tell you that we devised a program for teachers, a 1-year course, rhetorical program, a 1-year course that is really based on classical rhetoric, containing all the elements of citizenship education, theatre. Theatre is immensely important in terms of fully understanding what rhetoric is. The actio part is actually a theatrical performance in some ways, and it was taught in antiquity by actors, as we know. So, just to refer to your past, present, future, have we done it? Yes. Have we discussed it with the authorities? Yes. Where are we now? Well, things are kind of in a sleeping phase. So hopefully one day in Slovenia teachers will have this course, 1-year course, which will contain rhetoric and citizenship education. Just to make clear, we use terminology rhetoric and oracy. So in Slovenia we don't use this term, not even in referring to the English literature. I myself have used it in my articles. Can I ask you to specify what is oracy and what is rhetoric, so we are on the same page?
Yeah, so when I talk about rhetoric, I'm usually referring to classical forms of rhetoric, so the kind of authors that I outlined previously, something which classicists are very familiar with, and is usually symbolized by argumentation, negotiation, very specific ways of structuring speech in order to persuade. Oracy is something more general, and in the UK it is generally defined as active listening and effective spoken communication.
Thank you very much. So, just to connect this definition with the work that you do, you use oracy framework with rhetorical perspectives for designing a model for assessing oracy skills. Can you tell us something more about it? You will talk about that extensively, but Lisa will not be present, so...
Yeah, I have been a teacher for many years, and in Norway we have oral exams. And for oral exams they have it's a 30-minute examination, oral examination, And you can have it in all subjects. And it's the end of 10th grade, which is the end of lower secondary. And your grades will determine whether you get into high schools and what high school you get into. And this competition goes some are more popular than others and have more status. And it's divided in the vocational line or academic line. So it's very important actually that you get grades on your oral exams. And then after, in high school, you also have oral exams, and you continue into university, where you also have oral exams. And so when I was a teacher, I was wondering, how do I grade the students on the oral exams? I'm wondering, what counts? Does it count that you have eye contact? Does it count that you look up from your manuscript? Does it count that you're able to listen to the questions asked and give a good answer back? Does it count that you have a good voice and pitch, energy in your tone of voice? I mean, what actually counts is it just the content as the meaning of the words, as fact and terminology. So, after many years as a teacher, I decided to be a teacher educator. As being a teacher educator, I wondered about the same thing, having oral exams for my teacher students. So, then I started to take a PhD, and what did I write about? Well, how to assess RSA. So, able to have words for what I was measuring. I was measuring this quantitatively first, before I went into interviews with teachers and students. So in this quantitative survey, I use rhetoric. I use Aristotle, logos, ethos, pathos. And for those who are not familiar with it, logos is when you measure kind of like the subject terminology, the vocabulary and statistics and like strictly content you can measure that way. So I did this inspired by Aristotle, not totally the same meaning. So when I was measuring ethos, this way the students establish their ethos through the examination. But their ethos is divided in 3 parts. It's when they come into the examination, they have questions that will be a long answer here, but shortly. One of the examinators will know the students beforehand, so the ethos is already established. That's the homeroom teacher. However, there will be a teacher from a different school that's also an examiner, where the ethos will be established through the student's speech. And at the end, there will be kind of a terminal ethos, which will be graded, okay? And also there is a pathos in this, because it's how the teachers are convinced through the whole speech, how make them feel. Does it feel good to give them a good grade? No, it's not right to give them this grade. Am I persuaded that the students will have the best grade? So I kind of divided it like this. I tried to measure it quantitatively. And interesting, all ethos, logos, pathos, it's in all subjects, even in math. So it was interesting results, and I can tell you more about that tomorrow. Yes. But for me, it showed that Aristotle's 2,500-year-old knowledge still is good for us today when it comes to talk about assessing students' language. So it's a tool that can be used.
So you've been using this for how long now?
Since 2015.
Okay. Mm-hmm. And have results that...
yeah, it seemed to work.
It seems to work.
It seems to give a language to teachers when they assess.
Thank you. So just to move a little bit out of the school environment to the wider society context, and I am turning to you, Lisa. Your prominent field of study is political rhetoric, especially different levels of public discourse, as you told us yesterday. So, how would you describe the attitude towards rhetoric in your country in terms of different discourses, let's say medical, political, popular, media, and so forth? Is rhetoric something that is being reflected there, present, being discussed, and the similar?
I think the primary focus is on politicians and their, especially their oral communication, where rhetoric most often is brought into the conversation and used as a tool for analysis and evaluation. But once in a while, the rhetorical glance or focus turns to other areas. So, for instance, scientific communication during COVID, lots of discussions about, you know, who do we trust, why do we trust them. In our country, we had almost weekly press conferences with the Prime Minister, flanked by health authorities and political allies, and how they were speaking about different topics, and you know, you could sometimes sense slight differences of opinion, which is completely fair, but that made it very obvious that you have to talk to people in different ways. So there were information campaigns for young people that addressed the issue of COVID in a very different way than the public version. And most recently, the climate movement has spurred a lot of discussion about what are legitimate versus illegitimate ways of protesting and thematizing issues of climate and sustainability. So, so my general sense is that rhetoric in the Danish society has gained a certain status as a resource we can use when these topics come up. I forgot to mention one last thing, which is issues of gender and identity politics, which is also tends to be a hot topic. It's certainly something people love to get excited about. And there's also an attention to how that is a matter of communicating in public. So I think that if I had to try to get something out of that, it is that there's a growing feeling that rhetoric is not solely about a person trying to convince someone else in a particular situation, that it is a field that contains principles that have a wider significance and can be used as, I like to sometimes think of it as cultural analysis, because in the public rhetoric that we encounter, we can see either explicitly or implicitly the types of values that are being promoted or demoted. And that's really what I find the most interesting. It's a linguistically based cultural study to me.
Just a sub-question, because in Slovenian context, obviously the political discourse is a prominent field where rhetoric enters in terms of watching, observing the phenomena. But the analysis that we usually get are very superficial, saying that a politician was persuasive because he or she stood like this, or spoke like this. Very rarely, by very rare individuals, are their arguments analyzed in the context of the situation when being put up front. So, and you said that rhetoric in Denmark is used as this analytic tool. So, what are your rhetorical analysis like? Not yours, but of the public, let's say, public response to the political discourse, to politician addresses and stuff like that?
Well, once in a while we're in the lucky and fortunate situation of having several people with a rhetorical background debating something. So usually people who work as consultants to companies and organizations will comment on a public speech from a very effect-oriented point of view, and frankly, sometimes I think that falls under the characterization you were just giving, that, you know, if you have a one-liner, that equals success. And then sometimes another person with a rhetoric background will say, you know, there really are a multiplicity of criteria for evaluation. Effect could be one of them. It's very difficult, it's very problematic in many ways. I'm not saying it's irrelevant, but it's difficult to handle. But you could talk about other things. One could be aesthetic, in hope that it was beautiful, was it creative. Another one could be, you know, what are you modeling for your listeners? What kind of attitude are you modeling towards political disagreement? And I think that's just as rhetorical as considering, you know, did people leave the room wanting to vote for this person or not?
And also, what is generally considered as fallacy is not always a fallacy in the moment that the event is taking place, the rhetoric is taking place. Right.
Absolutely. So you know, usually we all taught that an ad hominem attack is a really bad thing to do because you're going, in Danish the saying is you go after the ball and not the person. I don't know if that translates to other, but I think you get the image that, I'm sorry, of course the other way around, going after the person instead of the ball. So that's why we consider it a fallacy. But sometimes if someone is being overly aggressive, you almost have to sidestep the discussion and say, oh, well, let's bring it back to where we're at. Same thing with an appeal to authority. You know, if you're discussing COVID with someone who doesn't believe in the disease, a starting point is to say, well, these experts, who you also respect, say that it exists. Yeah. Of course, if you don't share that sense of authority, then it's good for nothing. Yeah. But so the point here is that it's all contextual.
It's contextual. From the politics to the youth in the UK, today you give us a beautiful example of many, many organizations that would somehow use oracy and rhetoric to help them to gain their voices, their voice, and to be heard in society. Can you put one example here, just to describe the importance of such movements, and what is the, I don't know if that's a proper question, do young people like that? Do they like to attend to that activities?
Yeah, so I guess an example I would give is the charity Shout Out UK. So this is a charity which campaigns for political literacy. They think it's really important that young people in schools feel equipped with the skills to be able to engage in the political environment, but also to feel that they have some agency in what they're doing. And citizenship is on the national curriculum in England. It is not widely taught. This might seem a little bit of a disconnect, but if it's on the national curriculum, surely everyone learns it. You might think so. There are not enough citizenship teachers, so actually the learning and teaching of citizenship is very patchy in England, and so this charity is trying to do something about that. And what I think is really revelatory about this charity is two things. First of all, they're very good at getting funding from large trusts and foundations to run courses for young people in schools completely free. So at a time when schools' budgets are restricted and declining, the fact that the charity can offer these workshops for young people without charging the parents any money or the schools any money is fantastic. The other thing which they have done recently, which I think is brilliant in terms of young people feeling like their voice matters, is they're working in partnership with a government department. This is the Department for Digital, Culture, Media and Sport, and they have together formed the Youth Policy Development Group, where government ministers and civil servants are coming to this group of young people who applied to be part of the group via Shout Out UK, and together they're talking about, well, what are the challenges facing young people in Britain? How could we together, as a group of young people of different ages, between 16 and 25, charity representatives, key stakeholders from the political environment more generally, and crucially, policy representatives, together collaborate in order to find some solutions. So I think the work of Shout Out UK really deserves to be applauded. How encouraged or engaged are students in this work? Very, I would say. Shout Out UK aren't working with every school across England, and I think there definitely are inequalities which need to be addressed. But certainly in the work that I've done with schools, there's a huge appetite from young people to feel more equipped to stand up and be heard.
Thank you. Anne-Grete, there's a similar thing in Norway that you've been a part of. How do youth respond to rhetoric?
Well, yeah, they love it when they learn it. I think it's very useful. And I've been so lucky to be a part of something called Seize the Word, Ta Ordet, which is from the University of Bergen, and Professor Janja Žmavc started that in 2016. And for 2 years I was also part of that, and give courses to teachers on how to teach rhetoric. And again, they teach students rhetoric, and the students are able to compete, write a good speech of something they burn for and want to change the world on, so we call it deliberative rhetoric. And they argue for a case they want to proceed. And the speech is 5 minutes, and the competition is on the stage in the University of Bergen. So it's a big deal. And
it's not a debate format,
no,
right?
it's a speech.
It's important to set the difference between
Right.
debate formats, which are really important as a form of skilling up, but they are different from the speech competitions, I believe.
Yes, and they have speeches about, for example, they're burning for the environment, wanted somebody to make choices to buy ecological eggs instead of buying regular eggs. There was a speech that won 1 year. It was really 3 good arguments for that, and she was very persuasive.
And how do they train? How do these young people that want to be a part of this, how do they train? Do they have mentors, or do they do it independently?
In the beginning, they train at the school with the teachers, with the group, the students are grouped, and we have teaching materials on this, so they actually train each other, get feedback to each other, and then they said, well, I think Arlene here is the class winner, and she goes on to maybe the school competition, and then Arlene maybe also win the school competition, and then she goes to the national competition, which is the University of Bergen, and where she meets other school winners. And then again, there is one winner, and that might be you, Arlene. And then she will be on the stage, and then in that period, when she enters the competition at this level, she will have a mentor from the rhetorician at the University of Bergen. So she will get mentor from. So it's really a fun thing, and the students really love it.
Excellent, thank you. But we are in a very specific time and place right now, facing technological development, artificial intelligence, and machines talking, machines writing. So what will happen, in your opinion, with rhetoric? How can rhetoric as a discipline or as an educational content benefit from the technological development? This will be my final round, and I would like each of you to reflect on this. Yeah.
There's an American rhetorician by the name of Carolyn Miller who has written wonderful things about genre. But more than 10 years ago, she wrote an article about machine feedback to public speaking. What happened was that it was actually not true what she was writing. She wrote to a lot of public speaking teachers saying, we have this new system that will allow you to have students record their speeches, and the system will help you grade it, which will be a fantastic time saver for the teacher. And she asked them, what do you think about this? What should we think about as we finalize developing this product? And throughout the feedback, she was getting the sense that teachers were kind of worried about this because they felt that it would be, again, a one-size-fits-all response that the students would get. and that the interaction between the feedback giver and the rhetor, the student, would suffer.
Let me just briefly intervene, because it just struck me, in the antiquity, you wouldn't have to be rhetorically equipped. You could order a speech from the logographer. So when it comes to rhetoric and being persuasive, what one would have to do in antiquity is to simply own the text that he was given. And maybe we are facing some kind of similar situation.
You could say that, and I could certainly see how a student could use a ChatGPT to say, write a speech on why we should support windmills. And I think the challenge for us as teachers is to then show the student, okay, so here what you have is a raw outline. You might actually learn something through the principle of mimesis by looking at, because that's what this machine is good at. See, when I was thinking about this topic, I actually didn't think about argument number 3 here. I learned something there. So you could learn something from that, maybe the structure, but it would be stale. It would be anonymous. It would be sterile, I think, in a real life situation. So you, as a teacher, we would have to say, all right, how are you going to bring this alive to that particular audience? How is it going to sound as if this is something that came from you? And that, I would say that that would require some manuscript changes, so on the word level. But then, of course, as you were suggesting, eventually it's memoria and actual. If you can't deliver it as your own words, then it's not going to be quite clear.
I would use the word to inhabit a speech. With your own. I don't want to say personality, but with your own perspective towards topic, towards.
And I mean, I don't think it's difficult for any of us when we see elite speakers. I'm thinking of people like George Bush or President Barack Obama or Donald Trump, and any other political leader who uses the teleprompter. And some of them, they read the words perfectly well and they pronounce them perfectly well, but it's as if it doesn't go through their brain. It just goes through their eyes and out their mouth. And it's just words that they're mouthing. And others are able to lend the words expression. So that's a whole different discussion about speechwriters and everything, but we were getting, the point was, as rhetoric teachers, I wouldn't write off ChatGPT completely. I'm unsure about how to use it, but I think it gives us an opportunity for talking about critical thinking.
Thank you. Arlene, what's your opinion on this?
I think that AI represents an opportunity for us as rhetoricians. I think it gives us the chance to show how we are distinctive from other parts of the curriculum, because I don't believe that what we do can be replicated by AI.
Okay.
So logos, okay, I can see that AI can help with that, right? So we think about what British politicians might be remembered for. Tony Blair will probably be remembered for education, education, education. Could AI help with that? For sure. Theresa May will probably be remembered for strong and stable, right? For sure AI can help with that. The person who probably is attracting most kudos in the UK at the moment as a public speaker is someone called Mike Lynch. Have you heard of him? He is the leader of a trade union. So we're experiencing a lot of rail strikes in Britain at the moment. Our trains are not running a lot of the time. because the train drivers feel like their terms and conditions are not what they should be. And their representative in every TV interview, in every newspaper interview, in every radio interview is this man called Mike Lynch. And he clearly has studied rhetoric because he is able to bat away interview questions and dismiss stupid questions with an ease which has been seen by no British politician, I would say, in the last 100 years. So the people in the UK who I think are getting most respect for their public speaking currently are getting that not because of what ChatGPT could offer in terms of the words, it's for the ethos and for the pathos, and I don't believe that AI can help with that. We can help with that.
Anne-Grete, what do you think about AI, ChatGPT?
I'm online with these women. I think it was great listening to you guys, and I think the beautifulness of a human, nobody can actually copy. I think that goes beyond. And all these beautiful students sitting in our classroom, beautiful minds, that we need to teach being critical thinkers. I think we need teachers that know rhetoric, and I also think we need teachers that use ChatGPT in their classrooms, and they need to play around with it themselves so they know that ChatGPT, what they can do, because I think the new versions now will actually be able to, you can construct an audience. Can you make these texts into talking to children? Can you make this text talking to colleague teachers? So actually there's these, the ChatGPT is pretty advanced, but I think the beautiness of a person really displaying a speech. For example, if you go to I Have a Dream and Martin Luther King, ChatGPT cannot copy that. There's so much things going on that I think is amazing by being a human.
Yeah, that's a...
So what do you think, Janja?
Well, I'm not sure that I entirely agree, because I think that digital technology is fundamentally changing something that is happening in society. Maybe something that we are not at this point able to reflect on properly. What I think is important is the critical perspective that all of you raised, and that those tools can be used for as an assistance to maybe practice. But I think there is another dimension, and this is my foot being strongly in the classical antiquity, that rhetoric was always taught through bodily experience, and it was always taught with the idea of writing first and then speak. So I think we are at the really interesting point of what's the real question for me is what's going to happen with manual writing. Not what's going to happen with what GPT can and cannot do, but what we are as human beings going to do with the disappearance of the writing, because this is extremely important for the oral for Actio. This is why I am fairly reserved, not being afraid of it, just want to have time to properly reflect on it. For me, it's easier to ask questions about, okay, let's ask Aristotle. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I think would you like to add something to your thoughts?
Yeah, I would just like to say that in the UK, I think we are interested in what's happening in Norway around the oral assessments, because I think policymakers and teachers can see that with the rise of AI and ChatGPT, how do you know if the student actually wrote this themselves or whether they got some assistance to write this? And so there are teams of people who are looking now at, well, could we maybe switch to oral exams? It's harder to get assistance if you're in a room with a teacher and you have to defend your knowledge in a personal oral engagement setting. This has not been part of British education for a very, 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 very long time. We've always had written exam culture. But it's something that I think the influence of AI and how it develops in future could affect in the UK and perhaps in some other educational contexts that don't currently have this oral exam. So I'm saying this because I hope that there's now a partially open door for us as rhetoricians to say, and we've got something that we can offer in this regard.
Thank you.
Job market.
Job market. At this point, I would like to open discussion and give the voice to the audience, to the lovely crowd that have joined us today. So if there are any questions, comments, anything, I think I can say for all, would appreciate it.
It's not a question, it's more of a comment. I agree with Anne-Grete when she mentioned the speech, I have a dream and so on. I would like to bring here in the so-called Lovelace test, which says, named after Ada Lovelace, Byron was her father, by the way, that the artificial intelligence will really pass the test when it will create something that was not being trained for. So this is a moment perhaps of creativity, which today's artificial intelligence does not have it yet. Okay.
Would you like to respond to that comment?
Well, I mean, it reminds me, I saw just an op-ed in a newspaper recently where they were discussing this, and the writer said, I have these two principles that battle in my mind, and they were quotes, and I can't remember who said it, but one was, you have to have a really strict systematized knowledge and competence in order to break it. So you're, stepping out of the shape is where creativity comes out, and having that disciplined background is that's a facilitator of creativity. And the competing claim was, nothing comes out of order. You have to have chaos, and then something new can happen. And this person kept debating which one should we trust. And I think what you're saying is that that the orderliness, the systematization that AI does so well, and that's what I was trying to say, risks producing very stale products, certainly products, but stale, or, just without personality. So will AI be able to say, look, the first part of my I have a dream speech is written down, and then I'll just go into a different mode where it's more like a song. I don't know if you can program AI for that kind of thing. Maybe it'll be possible, but
maybe
it'll take a little while.
Not in our time, possibly.
Well, I don't know. So one of the projects I'm working on at the moment is with some psychologists. Now we have some psychologists in the audience, and these are social psychologists who work on the vocal variation of people's speech when they're being successfully persuasive. But their counterparts, in the kind of opposite lab, work on listening, so they study the psychology of listening and what impact having an engaged listener has on a speaker and their chances of being successfully persuasive. So I can see that there could be a time in future where these people, these psychologists, these colleagues in the social sciences, who actually know a lot about vocal variation and how that relates to successful persuasion. I mean, surely they could tell a machine, this is what successful persuasion looks like in terms of vocal variation, and then maybe they're, maybe the machine could read the speech to you using this data from psychology. Would it be as effective as a real person who's trained in doing it? I would say no, because I think there's a lot more to actio than just vocal variation. And I think there are things that actually the computers can't be trained to do. Maybe I'll look back and regret having said that. But I think that we can learn a lot by cooperating with colleagues in other fields. And certainly I have learned a great deal about vocal variation and how to study it from psychology colleagues.
Thank you. Lisa, you wanted to add something?
Yeah, just piggybacking on that. I think there's a difference here between those of us who have very small languages, Slovenian, Danish, and Norwegian, and English, because AI will be much slower with our languages. So we have a little time to learn from other bigger languages' experiences. This is just a reflection I had recently. I started watching a documentary about nature, some wild animal doing something, and it was a foreign production, and it was dubbed and clearly by a machine. So the intonation was off, not terribly. I mean, the pronunciation was fine, but the intonation was insensitive. So to me that was very easy to spot and very annoying. I'm not sure other people would react that way, but I wonder if that's also something that we can talk about with students, train their listening skills and say, this is a good clue that probably this isn't the person speaking to you. Sometimes if you call an insurance agency, they will say, you're speaking to robot number 2. And at least they're saying it instead of pretending that it's a person.
Yeah.
But I think we in this field need to make that very visible so that at least you are aware that, no, you're not talking to a person.
Yeah. Thank you. Any other comment? Yeah, sure.
Yeah, I was just thinking about these oral exams. I think oral exams are really good because I think students need different types of examinations, because somebody is really maybe good at writing, somebody has dyslexia, and it's good to give students opportunities to shine in different test situations. So I think oral exams actually is a very good way to test the students in subjects, in different subjects.
I agree, absolutely. But I think we've said the most important things related to the context of rhetorical education. We did not tackle all the dimensions that rhetoric has and that we've talked about yesterday, today, and tomorrow. So I would propose that, because tomorrow is going to be a cloudy day, and this is me being rhetorician, and there is still sun outside, that we wrap this up. And I thank you all for coming, and thank you to my wonderful guests for sharing your ideas. Thank you.